Hi, this is Derek Murphy of creativity.com. This is the first video of a three-part series on how to write, publish, and market a book in 2017. I've been publishing for about 15 years. I've only now, after having learned how to do all this stuff for 15 years, started to see a lot of success with my own writing. For the last 5 or 10 years, I've been helping other authors design and market their own books, and now I decided I wanted to start writing fiction. So last year I wrote my first fiction, and now in 2017 I'm just about to the point where I'm making a living with my writing off of a couple of books, and I'll be putting out like 10 more novels this year and to start to actually see quite a bit of income from my writing, which is exciting. So in this video I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to write a book, both fiction and nonfiction, and especially the things that are probably challenging you or frustrating you if you're starting to write a book, or if you haven't been able to finish writing a book. Because the important thing to keep in mind is that writing a book is very difficult. There's a lot of pieces to it. It's challenging to put it all together. But if it's something that you want to do, and probably if you're watching this video, you know that you want to write a book, you'd like to publish a book. So that means there's probably barriers that are slowing you down. And so I want to address what some of those barriers are and how we can try to overcome them. So for fiction and nonfiction both, I'm a big fan of plotting or mapping out your novel or your nonfiction book. I think once you have an outline, once you know where you're going, that's going to take out a lot of the stress and frustration. I know that a lot of fiction writers enjoy the process of discovery. A lot of pantsers don't know exactly where they're going. That's fine for literary fiction or romance or character-driven fiction where the plot isn't that important. It's mostly about the relationships, which is fine if that's what you want to do. Or if you want to traditionally publish a book, a lot of traditionally published genres, they're looking for something a little more creative or different. So it's okay to do something that's unique. If you're self-publishing, most readers for most popular genres, they're not looking for something completely different. They're looking for something pretty similar to things that they already like. So you don't want to have something that's unquantifiable, that doesn't fit into any genre categories, because not only are you not sure that readers are going to like it, but you don't know where to put it when you're marketing it. So if you don't know what shelf to put it on, when readers go to a bookstore, maybe they want a paranormal romance book or horror or thriller book, they'll go to that shelf and look at the books on that shelf. If your book isn't in any of those categories, and it's not on any of those shelves, it's buried in the back room somewhere. They won't be able to find it. So you have to know where your book fits in. You have to know where it goes in the bookstore or the online bookstore so that it's discoverable. That's a big thing we'll talk more about in the other video on marketing once you're actually going to launch your book. But it's important when you're thinking about writing a book to know which shelf it's going to go on and whether it's going to satisfy readers of a particular genre. You have to know who it's going to be for. It's a lot easier to write a book if you know what kind of book you're writing and who you're aiming to entertain or to please. Because if you're not aiming to entertain anybody, if you're just writing a book for yourself and you have no idea who's going to like it, maybe you're writing a memoir or your life story or whatever, you may be hoping for commercial success, but that's a long shot if you aren't writing something for a particular readership. So I think it's a lot easier. Not only is it more commercially viable, it's a lot easier to make money if you write a book considering the market. It's also just a lot easier to finish a book if you're writing for a certain market, because then you know what kind of book you're writing. For nonfiction, it's a lot easier. You have a topic you're trying to communicate, probably educate certain types of people about a certain thing. So that should be pretty well structured. And then you're just outlining it. So you're like, this is the process you need to learn that I'm trying to teach. How do I break it up into chunks? And then you just go through. Once you have an outline, you can just go through and write it a little bit every day. Put all your ideas out, all of your knowledge out. For nonfiction, something else I say a lot is that the easy way to write a best-selling nonfiction book is just get a lot of engagement from other people in your community. So even if you don't already have a huge platform, if you're writing a nonfiction book, you should be reaching out to 20 or 30 or 100 bloggers or business owners in your genre who are experts at the thing you're talking about, and ask them to give you a quote or a short story or a piece of advice, something short that doesn't take up a lot of their time, but you can just send them a form and say, hey, I'm writing this book. you've been inspirational to me. I would love it if you could take 5 minutes and jot down a couple ideas. You want to make it sound really easy so that they actually do it. You don't want it to be like a big favor. But if you can get even 20 or 30 people to give you something that you can put into your book, not only does it give you content that you can use to make your book. I've seen people who don't even write the book. They just get 100 people to submit something and then they just edit it together as a book. I think that's fine, but generally I think you should have a structure from A to B to C, like this is how you should do the thing, and then you would get other people's stories or advice or quotes to kind of sprinkle in there to make it more engaging. Because for nonfiction, the information is really important that you're trying to communicate, but also story is really important. So if you're just giving information, it's harder for people to picture it or to resonate with the material. And if you want it to be a bestseller, if you want a lot of people to enjoy it, it's got to be a mix of practical information and story that they can see, because you want to be, same with fiction, you want to be putting pictures in their head that they'll remember, so that the scenes that will stick out. So any little anecdotes or stories that you can put in nonfiction, not only does it make it more engaging, because the problem with a lot of nonfiction, if it's all just content, is that they may give up. They may, if it's not holding their interest, if it feels like it's challenging to read, like they're studying or something, they won't read it. So it's your job not only to give quality information that's going to help people, but also to keep them reading with engaging stories. So that's also important for nonfiction. With fiction, like I said, I'm a big fan of plotting and story architecture. I think the majority of popular fiction and even a lot of literary fiction has some kind of a hero's quest in it. Not all of it does, but generally you'll have a character that starts off dissatisfied, they have a lack, they're not sure exactly what they want. That character will get a call to action, which is something that disrupts their current lifestyle and pulls them into the action, something usually that doesn't happen by choice. They didn't choose to go on this adventure, but they're led on this journey. They meet a lot of new, interesting characters. They're challenged over and over again. They probably have a run-in with some chief antagonist who wants the same thing that they want and is always trying to frustrate their aims. Generally, for the first half of a book, the main character just wants to not be involved, and they just want to go back to that simpler life they had before, even though they weren't really happy with it. But by the midpoint of the book, they decide, by the quarter, I don't show you, I have a little book called The Plot Dot, which is the way that I structure my fiction based on the hero's journey, but instead of 12 points around the circle, I only have 8, I think. So they're like the main plot points I think most books should hit. It's not absolutely necessary, but if you're writing popular fiction and you want to sell well, it's a really good idea to put in these plot points, because readers expect a certain kind of story and they respond emotionally to certain pivots that happen in the story. So not only is it important for satisfying readers, but it also makes it so much easier to finish your novel. I wasn't really able to finish a novel. I had drawers full of stories that didn't really go anywhere. But once I learned plotting really well, I finished my PhD in literature, and then I studied plotting really hard. So I figured out a process that works for me. And that way I can outline these, 8 major points in my book, and I can make sure I write to them. So I know I plot out those scenes, I know what happens in those scenes, and then I just have to fill in everything in between. So how do we get from the first plot point to the second plot point to the midpoint? Part of it's character driven. You have your character that's developing and they're going through a story arc. By the midpoint, they're looking, they've decided to fight back, basically. That's the main thing that happens at the midpoint. So they've been reactive, and by the midpoint they become proactive and they decide to fight back and try to defeat the enemy or whatever, but they fail. So everything that they do, now they're being proactive, but they screw something up or something happens on accident that's their fault. Because of their actions, something terrible happens. It seems like the bad guys have won, so they have a dark night of the soul. And then after everything is really bleak, then they dig down deep and pull out their newfound confidence or power or whatever, and use that to defeat the antagonist. The antagonist doesn't have to be a bad guy or a villain, but it generally is. It's something that's frustrating the protagonists aims. So that's like, you want to have that kind of character development. You definitely want strong characters that learn and grow, so they're not just a lot of urban fantasy characters. They start off really tough and they just kick ass right away, or they're even in thrillers, a lot of thrillers will start with a detective or something who's already pretty strong-willed, and then it's mostly about the action. That's okay in some genres to focus mostly on the plot or the action, but at least you need characters that, if they don't grow, at least they're sympathetic. At least they're not annoying or boring. Because if the characters aren't sympathetic and readers don't like the characters, they're not going to care what happens to them. So that's something else you need to consider when you're writing a novel, especially in the beginning. You need to make them sympathetic. You need to make your readers identify with and care about what happens to the characters. Otherwise, if people just start dying right away, they don't care that people are dying. It doesn't impact people because they don't know who the characters are, so they're not going to care about who lives and dies, and they're not going to care about any stressful situation. So if you put your protagonist in a dangerous situation before the reader cares what happens to the protagonist, then that's not real story. It's not going to have any effect on the reader. Those are a little bit of tips about writing fiction that might help. I'm going to try to keep these videos pretty short. I don't consider myself like a writing coach, but I have studied quite a bit of it, and I'll probably talk a little bit more. I might do a course that's how to write fiction that sells, so I might have a course out like that in the future. Right now I only have book marketing courses, but in the next video I'm going to talk about how to publish a book. So this book was a little bit about how to write a book in 2017, and my main takeaway tips are: organize it and plot it out and know where you're going, and also know who you're trying to satisfy. You should have your readership in mind. So if you have a readership in mind and you plot out the structure, things are going to be a lot easier. And then in the next video, which is about how to publish your book, I'll tell you a few productivity and motivation hacks you can use to actually get the book finished if that's what you're having trouble with. Thanks, bye-bye.